Good morning, everybody. It's Jeff Goldberg for the Sales Pro Network. It's a beautiful day. Today is September 9th. I'm here on the East Coast. It's stunning. The weather's really turned beautiful post Labor Day. And as some of you may know, I am a sales coach and trainer. I work with both individuals and organizations to help them get measurable and sustainable sales increases. I love selling. I love the world of sales. And I founded the Sales Pro Network to elevate the profession of sales and to create a place where salespeople could hang out, come and get advice, network with each other. And as you may know, every Friday at 10 a.m., we either do a live training or we invite somebody who can add value to the profession of sales. And I know I say this pretty often, but once again, I've come through, my friends. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Matt Zinman. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Jeff. 9-9. I think we're off to a
9-9,
good start.
baby.
I like it.
I'm going to read from a little bit from your website. Matt is a difference maker devoted to empowering others to live their best lives. I like that. He's the creator of Innovative Life Enrichment Courses and the author of the book Z-isms, Insights to Live By. So, Matt, can we start out with, can you just tell us a little bit about your background or what brought you up to this point, and then we'll get into Z-isms?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm about to hit the middle of the fifth decade here, and lots of life experience. I know we can all relate to. I'm on my third career, so I started in marketing communication. Then I ran a nonprofit for 15 years called the Internship Institute, and now I'm running my publishing company built around my book. And then through it all, of course, you've got all the personal life experiences that go into it that enrich your life and you hope you can bring to bear to enrich others as well.
Got it. That's great. By the way, I forgot to mention, and I don't think I've ever said this before. We're doing a live interview. This gets converted to a podcast. For those of you who are listening to us as a podcast, this actually is a live interview. Matt's with me live right now. And I forgot to say, if you are watching us live, please do say hello in the comments. If you're watching us live on Facebook as opposed to LinkedIn or YouTube, if you haven't connected your Facebook account to StreamYard, I'm not going to know your name. So if you do say hello, please put your name in there. If you have any questions for Matt during this hour, please ask them and I'll communicate them to him. And if you're watching us on the replay, please put replay in the comments. And good morning to Adam Holzer. Who got to you, my friend? Good morning, Valerie Heffron. She says, good morning, rock stars. She's a rock star. I promise you that. Adam says he'd love to be connected. He doesn't even know you, Matt, but he wants to be connected to you already. So, okay, we'll hook the two of you guys up. Adam's a great guy.
Easy to find. Please feel welcome.
Yeah, and I'll hook the two of you up, and we'll absolutely give everybody Matt's contact information at the end. And Fran Call-Hebler says, good morning from Texas. Yeehaw, Fran, good to see you. So, Matt, your book is Z-isms, Insights to Live By. Why did you write Z-isms, and what's a Z-ism anyway?
Sure. Let's take it in reverse order with the subtitle really being the definition. We all have our insights to live by. These are life lessons that we've all come to know, the things that we constantly hear ourselves tell others, when we mentor them to try and enrich, again, one another's lives. And, I have my Z-isms that are represented in the book, and everyone else has their own life lessons to share.
Got it. So
sure.
Go ahead, please.
So, yeah. And in terms of, writing the book, there are, again, from the introduction, while we all have no substitute for experiences, for my part, I felt that some of my own were unique and enough that other people and the things that I'm talking about, I know we'll get into things like earned confidence, which is my chapter 1, other aspects of the book that are just unexplored, I felt were important to share, and it just continues to evolve. So that's pretty much why I wrote it to start us out here.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that age or experience means wisdom, but quite often through life experience, we do gain some wisdom. In fact, my stepfather used to love it before he passed, because I used to say to him, Dad, it's funny, the older I get, the smarter you get. There's just some things that you can't learn any other way than through going through them and learning those life lessons. So in describing the focus of your work, what do you mean by unexplored mind hacks and advanced life skills and enrichment practices? I read that. I'm like, okay, I think I know what he means. What is that?
Well, for one, I think at the foundation of everyone's life journey and enrichment is to be present. And the reality is that most of us are not. and that the greatest source of unhappiness for a lot of people is living in the not now. So that really comes down to our past. Some people might call it our baggage of all different nature that we rehash in our minds, or even if it's not anything that's deep rooted in terms of those experiences. It could be the conversation that you had with someone yesterday that you keep replaying, or it could be the future uncertainties like worries that are constantly running through people's heads, or making assumptions and things. So a lot of the mind hacks is we're talking about that are addressed in the book really take aim at trying to neutralize all of those things so that we can really live in the present. And then once we do that, there's so much more that's possible that I know we'll get into as well.
So when you say living in the present, is that not only living in the current moment, but also being present as opposed to, I'll admit, just before Matt and I got on, I was waiting for him for a couple of moments, and I decided to look on my phone at TikTok, and it made a noise, and he came on and he said, "What's that?" And you can't be present if you're staring at your phone. That's for sure. Is that also part of presence?
Yeah, that's really at the heart of it is, are you in the moment? And again, it's I struggle with this just as much as anybody does, in going through our days, and we have our automatic negative thoughts that are just part of our hard wiring, and it really comes down to being intentional and continuing to practice these types of things. Again, that we'll talk about to address them, because for example, Jeff, you can't experience gratitude if you're not present doing it, if you're not making a conscious, intentional effort. Um, the moments that you have with your loved ones, the memories that you create, if you're not really there, you're not really computing it, you're not experiencing the enrichment of it. And then those moments pass, without hanging on to them. So that's really what we're getting at here.
Yeah, and it's so almost insidious how the little voice in our head is continually telling us stuff, and we don't usually realize it, including people who are supposed experts, excuse me, or have been studying this stuff for years and years, which I certainly have. I'm not calling myself an expert, but I've been studying personal development for well over 40 plus years. And last week's guest was a memory expert. And I admitted to her that over my life, I've said a gazillion times, "Oh, I have a terrible memory. I can't remember names." She goes, "Stop right there. That's the first thing you want to get rid of. You're automatically setting yourself up for failure." So I've actually focused this week on paying attention to my little voice in my head and saying, I have a great memory. I do remember people's names. And it's funny how just a little shift like that can cause a big difference. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about?
That's spot on. Yeah. Being intentional, being mindful, um, even in just this moment of this conversation, to your point, we just don't think about these kinds of things, unfortunately, because we're living so much in our own minds than we are in the actual world, in the moment that we're living in them. And so just the example of what you're describing and you're experiencing, she's planted a seed with you that's made you more mindful, that started to help you practice, that's really, and you're going to hopefully find some encouragement in the experience of like, wow, yeah, I'm really, this has created a shift for me, and it's that shift that's going to help you keep going. So I hope you do.
Yeah, it's so funny. Now, all my life I've been saying I don't remember names, except I remember her name. Now, I spoke to her for an hour as a guest, so I certainly remember that. But something she did last week, which she said, "My name is Rena," which means joy. All week long, I'll be going, "Rena, joy, Rena, joy." It's like you can program your brain. Your brain is a supercomputer, and it's going to take whatever programming you're putting into it, including I have a bad memory or I have a great memory, and I guess everything else. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great example for
Yeah,
sure.
and we're also living in a society that seems to put so much value on multitasking. How can I accomplish more at the same time? My personal experience is I find that when I try to multitask, and I actually work with clients and tell them, don't bother multitasking, focus on one thing at a time. But it's a classic case of, the carpenter whose house is falling apart, driving and talking on the phone, drive right by the exit. How important is it to truly be present every moment? And how do we fight off the the million messages that are coming, bombarding us all day long, and the distractions.
Right. Well, I'll work backwards on that answer. One is in knowing yourself, and you and I have kind of the same perspective, and it's actually an inside joke that I speak to a lot in just knowing what your strengths and what your strengths are not. I literally, Jeff, cannot do two things at the same time for a second and not have the second thing take away from the first. I know this about myself. I joke with myself about it. I did it again. Please say that again. My, like you said, like my phone beeped or something, and I just missed that 1 second. Other people can multitask somehow. I don't know how they do it. I think, I talk about like I have man brain. Now it's not to mean, any kind of gender thing, but I do think that women are a little bit more better hardwired than men to be multitaskers. And I'm amazed at it, to say the least. I think in terms of our staying present, it's not possible to do all the time. We've got too many automatic things that are happening um, most of the time to begin with. And so what we're talking about here is really to the example that you gave just about your memory and taking note of the moments that are happening, is to be intentional. You really have to approach it like you're learning a new language, new hobby, you're learning a new instrument or something like that. It really is at that level. And right now, because it's not anything that we've intentionally practiced, none of us are really good at it. And it's like anything. Once you really start at it, you're gonna become more intentional. You're gonna become more mindful. You're gonna start getting momentum of recognizing that your life is feeling a little bit more enrichment because you're paying attention more to things, and that's where you're gonna continue to evolve.
Got it. My friend Erica, who is a brilliant sales trainer and coach in her own right, says, I have two kids and a dog. I have no idea what their names are. Brilliant.
I
And she
like that.
also says, oh, man brain, love this. It's refreshing to hear you say this in all honesty, because so many people will not admit that multitasking is not as efficient. I think I heard you say, and correct me if women are better multitaskers than men.
I think so. I think just evolutionary. Um, I'm not going to proclaim to be any science expert on this point, but I think I'm pretty sure. I think I know what I know here, that the data is there.
Probably because they're moms and moms have to do a million
Yeah,
things at
I'm
once.
like walking on
I
on thin ice
understand.
a little bit here, but yeah,
Let's not get
absolutely.
into any gender trouble here, but yeah,
Right, don't get in gender trouble. But look, I mean, it's important to know yourself. If you know that you can, multitask and not pay attention to somebody, who's talking with you and still be present for them, multitask. If you know you can't, then focus just on them at that time.
yeah. And my friend Valerie Heffron says ADHD diagnoses continue to climb in both adults and children. Do you attribute this to the nature of today's technology and or the attention economy?
You're asking me that question. I'm not really sure I'm the best expert to answer it. If you're asking me generically as a human being, I think that's certainly part of the equation. I think pharmaceuticals have something to do with that as well.
Hmm. It's almost also the nature of life right now. We are bombarded with messages all day long,
Right.
and the world is kind of a crazy place right now. You got politics and economy. The Queen died. I mean, not that that's huge in my life, but there's so much to pay attention to. If you're not really intentional and present, you're going to get lost. And certainly, as salespeople, we need to focus on our families and life in general, but we've got to focus on prospecting and selling and all the things that we have to do that make up our day.
I
Uh,
don't think our brains were ever built to take in the information at the level that we're at now. That's certainly, um, the case. No doubt about it.
yeah, it brings to mind. There was a book that Aldous Huxley wrote, and I can't remember the name. Can't remember. I read it a million years ago, but
You
he
could
talks about
remember, Jeff, if you were paying attention to your memory at that time.
it might be the doors of perception. For some reason, actually, I think it is. Now I'm
Okay.
going to have to Google that later. Did Aldous Huxley write a book called The Doors of Perception? But I remember reading that he equated the brain to a pressure cooker, and that the brain, a pressure cooker has valves on it that let pressure in or out as necessary, and that most of the time, our brain, we have to keep it very tightly, wound, because otherwise there's a gazillion stimuli going in every second. And he was actually talking about LSD, and how what LSD does is it opens up all the valves. That's why people have hallucinations and things like that, I've heard. Uh,
So they say. So they say.
Erica also says all women are agreeing with you.
I like to get on people's good side. That's where it's the right place to
Perfect.
start.
I have
Thank
another
you.
question. There's something I read. What is happierness, and how do we get some of that?
Yeah, it's funny because things have continued to evolve since the book, and happiness actually came after. It's not in Zisms, but it is a focal point of it being the core mindset of what I'm doing now. In and unto itself, happiness is about developing a positivity reflex. So it's along the lines of, while we can't control the things that happen to us, we can control ourselves in how we react to them. So it's a little bit about living in the silver lining. And we all have the ability to do that. And look, I mean, life happens, it's not all, rosy. Uh, but what can you take away from things that happen? How can you um, cope with them in such a way that you can get through them in the most healthy way and not have it be any more to your greater detriment than it naturally would be. On a broader scale, happiness is a lot of the things that we're already talking about. Again, grounding in the present. You can't have the happiness positivity reflex if you're not already grounded in the present. You're not being conscious of it. So in order to develop that reflex, you have to do the other things to ground yourself.
Hmm. So I believe happiness is a choice. Um, you choose to be happy, you choose to be sad, or you're at reaction to whatever's going on around you. So I think it's a smarter choice to realize you're responsible for it. But one of the things that I hear quite often from
May,
people,
may I clarify something real fast?
sure, please.
Happierness is not the same as anything in the happiness category. Happiness itself is fleeting. It's something it's very difficult to sustain. It's kind of like confidence in a way, right? Like you could try and get your confidence, but something's going to knock you down. You can't sustain happiness and in terms of it being a state of mind. Happiness is intended to be a life skill that you are choosing to make the best of whatever situation, whatever it may be. So I just wanted to
Thank you.
finish that
That's
distinction.
interesting.
Sure.
So happiness or happierness. One of the things that I hear from people quite often is you got to turn off the news, and I get that because I do listen to the news, but because I think things are happening so quickly and the world is such a crazy place that if you don't stay aware, there could be serious trouble. So, any thoughts on how do we stay aware of what's going on in the world and avoid the massive bad news that we hear every single day?
Yeah, again, I think it's about being intentional. Like, I'm a journalism degree. I was taught to read, the old school, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Like you got to stay on top of things. You always have to know current events, and those kinds. Becomes a habit. But I believe in that too. You can only take so much, and you have to know when enough is enough. If in recent years and even still now, a lot of the same news just keeps regurgitating. So you could be watching a news program for an hour, and then the next hour and the next guest starts, and just watch the whole thing over again with different guests talking about the same thing. You really only need to hear or know about something once. um Personally, you know when there are major tragedies, shootings and things like that, I almost like I know about them. I hear about them like they're there. I purposely do not get into the details. As horrible as those things are, I really don't want to put myself in a position of having to be right there emotionally with a grieving parent or whatever that might be. So you really have to more specifically answer your question, customize how it is that you want to take your news in. And fortunately, we have a lot greater ability to do that. Now with all the different ways that we get it, particularly on our phone. But if you're watching it on television, you're being spoon fed a little bit less. It's less intentional. It's going to come to you, whatever way they present it. So I think that's That's probably the best answer I can give in the moment.
Got it. It's interesting that you say about what you just said about the news, because it was only a few years ago that I realized that each hour is the same news. These cable news, I don't care whether it's Fox or MSNBC or whichever one people choose to watch, but it's the same thing over and over and over. And the people who are addicted and are watching any of those channels, hours and hours a day, it's like you're getting beat up and it's all the same. I actually thought that the news is constantly changing, but it's really not. You can really listen to 30 minutes in the morning or the evening, and you're pretty much caught up. So I would suggest, and I don't know him personally, but Tony Robbins is seems to be a very positive person. But you could be Tony Robbins himself, and with that constant barrage of bad news, it's very hard to stay positive and be happy or happier. Rich Atkins, Dr. Rich Atkins says mediaterrorism.org. I'm not sure whether that's talking about what we're talking about, or maybe that's a place to avoid it. I'm not sure, but I'll be looking that up later. Because
I mean, look, in any case, we are responsible for what it is that we consume. And I think it's a well-known fact. Whatever part of the spectrum you're on in your different kinds of beliefs, be those political or otherwise, it's pretty well accepted that if you're watching too much of any one thing, you're gonna get washed over by other people's thoughts, other people's opinions and influences, other than having a mind of your own. Let's put it that way.
So let's come back to happiness. I understand that your happiness concept led you to developing the Zism mind hacks and life skills into actual online courses that you offer, including a well-being reset, I think it's called, to address important needs like burnout. Is that right?
Yeah, spot on. Thank you. Look, what I realized, and we started out with, well, why did you write a book? Why'd you do this? But the reality is that after the book was published, I realized that it could not fulfill its purpose, because the techniques that we're talking about, the concepts and insights, don't lend themselves to being put into practice by just reading the book. And so just the utility of it was insufficient. So developing the courses and being able to put these kinds of things into practice is what really became necessary. And so the well-being reset, there's actually 3 courses. There's something called the Life Upgrade, which mirrors the full content of the book. And then there's a shorter course called the Mindset Reset that's just module 1 of that. The well-being reset is the newest course because it's more geared toward businesses, addressing the needs that everyone's facing as a result and continuing impact of the pandemic around burnout, emotional intelligence, developing empathy in terms of communicating, dealing with loneliness because of the isolation that we're in, and certainly areas of things like mood health, which is something that's a chapter in the book. The different, I'm just trying to think, Jeff, where specifically to go on this point. The well-being reset has the mindset reset as the first module. They all have the mindset reset. It's a standalone course because everything begins with mindset. So those 3 areas, and I think you mentioned an interest to speak to them, include perception, include something called earned confidence, which is my chapter 1, and then winning the battle within. All of those core components there are those foundational facets around happiness. When you get into the second part, which is the wellness, and then the third is about mindfulness, but more specifically focusing on wellness, it is the well-being reset. We're talking about mood health. We're talking about being a life athlete and the life skills that it takes, some of which we're already talking about here. And then energy management, which is another aspect that we really don't speak to or are not mindful enough of. I don't really speak to things like nutrition or physical fitness. Those things are not my areas of expertise. In the example of mood health, I personally have had to contend with depression since my teens, and it's something that's always been very private. And then when I published the book and started doing interviews, I felt it very important, especially now, to try and normalize the conversation. I've been on podcasts to just speak about this topic individually, but I describe it as mood health because everybody contends with mood health. Try to level the playing field. Everybody gets depressed to a certain degree on any given day or 2 days. The difference between a person who is a depressive and someone who isn't, aside from the the chemistry, that biochemical reality of how our bodies react to it, is that normal people, quote unquote, have the elasticity to bounce back. They get down for a day or two, then they have that, they can just level out. If someone who's a depressive, who's susceptible to that, like myself, um, if you're not intentional about, let's say, for example, a 3-day rule, which is something that I learned over time to self-parent myself with, which is to say, um, on day 3, it's like you're sinking into quicksand. That is my break point. If I don't take action, if I don't create structure for myself, if I don't reach out to the people who lift me up, if I don't exercise, and I let that get to a day 4, it immediately becomes twice as hard, then harder, then harder. And before I know it, I'm so deep into that quicksand, I'm really struggling to get out. And if you've ever experienced the depths of depression, the true depths of depression, you have the incentive to not let it happen. So the mood health section of the course, and this is just one example, there's only so much we can get into, has something called the depression defeater, which speaks to this 3-day rule that anybody can complete this activity. That basically is like, well, what's your game plan on day 3, in case of depression break glass, so to speak. And so they'll come out of that very brief exercise with this practical tool as a reference, just to, heighten their awareness of, well, what do I do when I'm feeling this way, whether that's depression or loneliness or anger or burnout. It's somewhat universal in these kinds of coping skills as they apply.
Yeah, I want to come back to burnout in a minute, but Valerie said, I'd love to hear your take on energy management. And I'm glad you said that, Valerie, because when Matt mentioned it, I said, oh, I want to hear about that too. And I'm not sure if I'm talking about the same thing, but I know that I'm a morning person. That's my conversation for myself. I'm a morning. Look, you have to know who you are. You said it before. I am a morning person. I wake up, I'm full of energy. 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I can't tell you how many times I've fallen asleep at my desk. And if I don't want to get rid of the excitement and energy I have at 10 o'clock in the morning with you, but I also hate that fade at 3 o'clock. Is that what we're talking about with energy management? Let me finish.
Yeah.
Mallory says that's something I struggle with daily. For example, when you schedule certain tasks. Oh, we're talking about the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. Well, energy management has 3 components, and they're really independent of the other: personal energy, interpersonal energy, and universal energy. So what we're talking about here, to Valerie's question, is personal energy. And it's something that, as an entrepreneur, I'm working for myself for 20 years, I've learned to basically manage my days rather than by time management, but by energy management. So, Jeff, exactly to your point, I'm at my best in the morning. Every day I've got the to-do list that I've no problem keeping myself busy, and it's endless. But what are the hardest things? If I have writing to do, if I have, finances, or, some kind of strategic planning, for examples, um, I want to do that when I'm at my most mentally acute. And so I'll align when I wake up in the morning, I'm feeling good. I've had my caffeine or what have you. That's when I want to knock those things out. Now, like a lot of more people now, I mean, as an entrepreneur, I work at home, and so there's everything to do above and beyond work. So if I'm hitting that wall in the afternoon, the laundry still has to get done. It's not a bad idea to get up from your desk and, move around and do other things that are a little bit more mindless. So that's personal energy. Interpersonal energy is back to that being present awareness and recognizing that anytime you interact with somebody, you and I right now, people that you're hearing from, during this conversation, there's an energy exchange. If someone just wrote something, through StreamYard here, and it was something really negative, like, right, you'd take that, you'd absorb that to a certain degree. So you have to also be mindful of interpersonal energy. um, I think everyone, for example, I like to use, can relate to going to a restaurant, with their friends, or having a great time, and then for whatever reason, the cliche about a server in a really bad mood comes to your table and flips you attitude, or what have you. Next thing you know, you're all in a, like, what's their problem, right? Well, a second ago you were in a great mood. The problem is that you let that person's energy transfer to you. So you have to be mindful of that, and instead be like, you and I, Jeff, were talking about, I was a single dad for many years. Now I'm very happily remarried, but I wasn't the best cook. My son and I were at restaurants all the time, and and we were mindful. When we ran into somebody who wasn't having the best day, we would make a conscious effort to break them out of it without them knowing. We'd be, crack a joke, or we make fun of each other, trying to get them to smile, because the energy transfers both ways. Universal energy, we're really now in the law of attraction. We're into getting into the flow. We're into manifestation and things like that. I think anybody who's into that is already well aware of it. So those are the three modalities, if you will, of energy management.
Got it. So we have to be aware of when we're mentally stronger and when we're not, and use it that way. Like when I used to cold call, and I don't anymore, but when I used to, I always used to do it first thing in the morning because that takes a lot of brain power. And I like you, I try to leave the things that don't take as much brain power for that time of day when I'm kind of shutting my eyes.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, look, we're talking to a largely sales professional audience. That takes us. Got to be on your game. I don't need to tell them that they're the professionals at this, but you've got to have a certain energy. And so, just generally speaking, I think that energy is a much more better life currency in terms of managing that than time. That's essentially the thought.
Yeah, I know I do stand-up comedy on the side, and I know if I've got like a 10 o'clock show to do, I'm not energetic at 10 o'clock, but you've got to be energetic on that stage. I make sure I program in a nap sometime between, mid-afternoon and late, because otherwise I can't get on stage and go, hi, everybody, I'm Jeff Goldberg. You got to bring it no matter what. And I love what you were saying about, the waiter or waitress that's, just not bringing it that day. I co-authored a book called Leverage Your Laziness. We talk about toxic vampires, people who just suck the life out of you. And the best thing you can do is, if you can't change them, well, you can't change anybody else, but if you can't bring about something where they can change their own attitude, get them out of your life, especially in sales. You've got no time for it, because we do have to be fairly positive attitude in sales. We just to protect ourselves, because most deals don't come through, and we've got to stay positive because most don't come through. We've got to believe that things are going to work out. When we let people suck the life out of us, we're kind of screwed.
Well, I wish we had 3 hours, because it's so tempting to get into all these different tangents that we have, but I can't resist that, who we surround ourselves with, who our tribe is, certainly has some of the greatest influence on our daily lives. And those energy vampires are a big part of that. And so, look, we have our friendships. Everyone goes through a rough time. We lean on each other. That's what friends are for. But if it's a constant, if you're always in a deficit with somebody who's just, you really have to make a conscious decision to say, I need to insulate myself from this person a little bit more, maybe not sever the relationship a little bit. Or in contrast, maybe you have an acquaintance with somebody always like, every time I talk to that person, they always lift me up, whatever, like ask that person out for a drink, or to go get together or whatever. Those are the kind of conscious decisions that you can make, truly above any other, in terms of how you spend your days with others, that can really enrich your lives, because you're with the people who are, more in line with your liking
Great
and
advice.
your well-being, to that matter.
And
Yeah.
nobody's going to take care of it for you. You really have to take care of it for yourself. I want to come back to something you mentioned a few moments ago. Sales is not an easy gig. I often say it beats digging ditches in the hot sun. I don't know that, because I've never dug ditches in the hot sun, but I'm assuming it's not as hard, but it's not easy. And lots of salespeople, and I've been in sales nearly 50 years. I've worked with tens of thousands of them. They experience burnout. We all go through that from time to time. How can we avoid burnout? And what do we do if we are feeling burnt out?
Well, look, I mean, sales, I think historically is known as a profession that's very prone to burnout, high pressure quotas, job security, and not hitting your quotas, challenges of sales cycles, things of that nature. Not all of which, Jeff, are, I think everyone knows, within your control. What is it that you can control, and particularly, in this aspect, is your well being, and making sure that no matter what, you can function at your best. And these are just life habits to begin with. But the reality is that we're not perfect, and lives and bosses and family demands and all the things that contribute to our going into that deficit take their toll over time. Burnout is naturally the result of prolonged self-neglect. And at the same time, it could be external factors that you really need to take inventory of, like, do I have control over my days? what are the things that I can gain control over so that I can level out? And one of the greatest challenges with burnout, of course, is that things that contribute to burnout, like there's not enough hours in the day. How do you make time in the hours that you feel you don't already have to really take care of yourself? And people also expect the quick fix. We all want the quick fix, but that's not the reality. And so when you're talking about recovering from burnout, that's not going to happen right away, and you have to make a conscious effort. And quite honestly, it really speaks to exactly what the heart of my work is about, with the well-being reset, and why I'm focused on companies. And I'm reticent to sound commercial or sell, and it just is what it is. But it's the methodology of having people have to go through it. You have to do this, then this, have to do the depression defeater before you get to the burnout reliever, before you get to the loneliness lessener, all these different activity tools that are just teed up one after the other. y- I'm forcing people to essentially go through these activities. It's the thing that the book can't do. Um, and then from the employer vantage point, it's like, wow, this is somewhat effortful. And it is, because that's what it takes in order to actually work. And so whether it's the likes of, my kind of a program or otherwise, it still comes down to people being self-devoted, and to recognize that I really need to make that a priority in order to feel better. And just, we know this consciously, as burnout as we might feel, or want to avoid feeling, that we know we have to pay attention to these things, because in being our better selves and being our healthier selves, we're going to be more efficient and effective and productive. So we know that, um, consciously, philosophically. I'm not quite getting the word I want here, but I think what I'm getting at is is that to make that effort, you'll be in a better spot. To sacrifice the time that it feels like the sacrifice to really pay attention to yourself, you're going to gain that time back through just feeling better. So, and I think that, naturally, ways to avoid burnout, or really, nip it in the bud. And, comes down to, a lot of these kinds of, things that you can do proactively, as well as things that you can eliminate, like not worrying so much, not causing yourself so much stress, not getting, back to the earlier part of our conversation, not getting caught up in, the things that have already happened that you can't change, beating yourself up. So there's enough that's going on in terms of external factors that we have to, respond to our boss being on our case about this or that, or, our family demands and things. But then there are the things that we also can control, that's happening within ourselves. And that's where we can really be intentional, and without even creating more time, just by through that intentionality. I almost got that right. People, will be much better off in that energy management aspect of their lives.
We keep coming back to this mindfulness and being present. And I think part of it is that, there's so much pressure in sales to produce. Sales is absolutely a game of, okay, great. You closed a great deal yesterday. What are you going to do today? As a manager, I'm guilty of that too. And organizations in general, we need to constantly produce, and that pressure does lead to burnout. I think part of it, and you're the expert, I'm not, but it does come back to that mindfulness. Am I sleeping enough? Am I getting enough exercise? When was the last time I took a vacation? Even eating, I noticed for myself that I gave up eating red meat for the most part. I mean, maybe I eat it once a month at the most these days. And I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, but I was in a process of losing weight a couple of years ago, and just by measuring, I found out that red meat has twice as many calories as fish or chicken. So I can eat a heck of a lot more fish and chicken if I'm watching my calories. And I just cut out red meat. And I noticed that I felt better and better over time. And when I do chow down on a burger or a steak now, I can actually feel it the next day. I feel I'm sluggish. So I think all of that is part of when you're feeling burnt out. It's not just that you're working too hard. There could be a bunch of other factors. Yes.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I like steaks and burgers as much as the next person, but I mean, I think it's for all of us to experiment, and just, that's simple. I mean, every one of us who loves steaks and burgers can do without them for a week or two. You still have to be be dialed in to say, well, okay, I'm making this effort to, eat a little bit differently. How am I feeling? Maybe you keep a journal about how you're feeling, just for those 2 weeks. You can do that. But it takes self-discipline. There's nothing easy about it. But if you want the end result, that's what it takes. There's no other way but through doing things a certain way in order to get there, and knowing it's for your own benefit. I think that's a great example, Jeff. Did I answer your question? Did we get all the way there, or there was more to it?
I believe you did, my friend. And
Okay,
now I want to switch topics. One of the
sure.
topics you talk about is sizing people up. Now, I'm fascinated there because that's an important skill for salespeople. We're constantly meeting new people all the time. How do we get better at sizing people up?
It's interesting because we actually have covered this to a little bit degree with energy management, because again, we're passive in our most people are passive in being conscious in terms of how we interact with people. But if you're really entering a conversation, even if it's just at the very beginning, and just kind of dial into like someone's energy, just start there. That's the first initial best way to size somebody up is how you feel being with them, how they are in their language, in just are they positive or are they negative? It's a this or a that. That's really where it starts. Um, is the conversation two-way? I had a conversation this morning with somebody, quite honestly, it was 45 minutes and maybe I got 10 words in. It was it just that's just how it went, and I felt helpless. Like, I think people can relate to this. So, at the same time, sizing people up also, refers to yourself, and being mindful of, what you bring to a conversation, and making sure that you are, leaving enough space for both parties in that exchange. So, I think we covered it pretty well already, but that's certainly from an through the lens of energy management, I think is really where the sizing people up is most important.
Hmm. And once again, that brings us back to mindfulness. I think salespeople in general are so intent on, here's what I've got to say now. Here's my next pitch, which is a word I hate, as opposed to actually being aware of what's the vibe I'm getting from someone. I
Yeah,
mentioned before
it's a
I've been
vibe.
studying. Go ahead.
Yeah, how do we vibe? That's
Yeah, because
spot
well,
on.
you know, in my personal development journey for years and years, one of the topics I've studied is, quantum physics or quantum mechanics. And, that says that everything is energy, everything, and it's all interconnected. So, you can, when you're paying attention, kind of feel what the other person is vibing. And if you get that negative vibe, then you're going to have a hard time relating to somebody. If you walk into a room, sometimes you just walk into a room and it's like, as opposed to the waiter or waitress that you talked about before with the bad attitude, you just feel happy just by being with the person. So it keeps coming back to mindfulness.
Yeah, I mean, look, sales professionals, are pretty good at if they're, I mean, from what I know of it, look, they're studying body language. They're studying the actual language. What kind of words are people using? They're taking it to another level, and those are certainly part of the equation that I think is more advanced. Is really more appropriate for salespeople to be that far along. The general person who I might answer that question to is really uh, focused on energy management, and I think that's just part of that whole equation. But to the full answer to your question, to the sales audience here, certainly goes well beyond in some of the things just mentioned.
I
Yeah.
just made a note. You just gave me a great idea. I wrote down body language expert interview. I used to work for a boss before I opened up my own consultancy, and the guy was expert at reading people. And he said, "Jeff, you got to study body language," and I did. Never got to the level that he was. At. It's astounding how much you can pick up when you're reading people's body language. Now, of course, doing work virtually makes that much more difficult. But I can give you an example. We walked into a sales call together one time, and when we walked out, he goes, "Did you see that woman's feet?" I'm like, "No, why would I be looking at her feet?" He goes, "Because it's an indication of what's going on in her mind." I'm like, "Okay, what did her feet tell you?" And he said, "Jeff, she did not want us there from the moment we walked in." I'm like, "Are you kidding? She was very friendly." He goes, "Nope, her feet were pointing at the door from the moment we walked in. That meant she wanted to get rid of us." And I said, Maybe I better study body language a little bit.
Right.
Boy, oh boy, there is some fascinating stuff. And anybody who's listening, I'm going to seek out a body language expert and bring them in to talk to us.
I will say, I don't believe it's 90%. I don't believe 90% of communication is nonverbal. I don't think that's true. For what
I don't
it's
think
worth.
it's 90% either, but
Yeah.
by being aware of somebody's body, I mean, I've read several books on the subject, and there are some just little things that you can look like. Almost everybody knows that when people cross their arms, they're shut down.
100%.
But there's just fat. Here's one that I found mind blowing: that if somebody says something to you and they scratch their nose, most likely they're lying, because when you lie, the capillaries in your nose expand and your nose gets itchy. Like, that's a good looking shirt.
That's interesting.
Just kidding. Yeah, there's fascinating stuff.
I'm glad I haven't been touching my face. I feel a lot better.
What is 1111, and what does that have to do with coincidences? I was fascinated by that, or curious.
Yeah, I have some fun with that part of the book, as one chapter builds on the other. We get into something called swimming with the current, which is again tuning into, that comes after energy management, where you're really paying more attention to your intuition and going with the flow. And then we get into chapter 10's about coincidences. I've always had a thing about coincidences. Again, and what you pay attention to and how they happen on a spectrum. That's a whole other topic. And then before we get into gratitude, before into the law of attraction, after which comes inevitability, I just have a little chapter on 1111. It's always been just a fascination for me, and I think a lot of people, as they catch it on the digital clock, kids are, make a wish, or I might tell my wife I love her. For me, it's a little bit more of a sign when I see the sequentials on the clock, that I'm a little bit more tuned in. I'm in the flow. If I catch 1111, not every time, but just referenced in that chapter in the book, I'll do some kind of gratitude exercise. I don't know if I have, if I just caught it for the last second or 59 to go, but it reminds me to just take pause and just maybe stand up and go to the window and just refocus. So it could be whatever meaning that anybody it has. I think it's a great opportunity to just tune in, and especially for gratitude.
That's so funny, because when I saw the 1111 written on your website, I'm like, that's interesting. 11 to 11. What is that? It didn't even occur to me that was a time of day. That was brilliant. And
I'm like,
so
where's 1111 on my website? What's also, purposely, it's my anniversary, with my wife. She's a veteran, right? We're talking Veterans Day. So look, you just have fun with it. And, that's what it's about.
It's so interesting you bring that up, though, because when you said that, I'm like, oh, it's so funny, because I almost always look at the clock at 4:20. It's my daughter's birthday. I just happen to, it's like, oh, Avery's birthday. There's some coincidence where I happen to, maybe it's just maybe I'm looking at the clock all day and I just happen to see 4:20, but fascinating.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a trigger. It's a trigger to just kind of take you out of the moment and make you can turn in that, just as anything else, like you just mentioned. That's a really nice way of putting it, into something positive, for sure.
Yeah. By the way, Matt, Valerie Heffron says your body language via your eyes indicate that you're recalling info from memory. Eye movement is key. Thank you, Valerie.
Thanks.
What does inevitability have to do with achieving our purpose? Everybody wants to achieve a purpose, whether it's a great one or a small one. What does inevitability have to do with that?
Inevitability is really something that it's after the gratitude chapter. I think everyone who's familiar with the law of attraction to a certain degree of manifestation, it's rooted in gratitude. And when we get into the area of inevitability, you're really aligning that with self-belief. And well, what is that self-belief about? It's about your purpose. It's about your life goals. It's about having that clarity. So as an entrepreneur, if you think about this as a business plan, most people look at that and say, okay, what's my 30, 60, 90? What's my 1, 3, 5, 10, in terms of my planning from point A to point B? When you look at inevitability, you're actually starting at point B. You're going as far out as you can for a vision that you set for yourself, and making that as crystal clear a reality as you can really wrap your head around it. It's probably best to do within a 2-year period, because after there's a lot of variables, but beyond 2 years, and this is, look, there's no science here. All right, Jeff, I'm just speaking from what I have in the book, my life experience, why I think this matters. And then when you get that, when you're really at that point B, fold that backwards, like almost like you're lining dominoes. And what would it be between there to here? And then you can look at those dominoes and say, do I need this one? Do I need this one? Or how can I get to this one sooner? And then you can, in a way, it's a little hard to explain without the full chapter, but in a way, you can kind of fold time in being able to realize, almost like hack your way a little bit further up those dominoes to kind of shorten that line. But if you really home in on that vision, again, this is a component of the law of attraction, that you can work backwards from that vision, almost in a business planning sense. And it's powered by self-belief. You basically have to look at that inevitability at a level of faith, as much as whether that's you believe in God or you believe in, in this case, in yourself. And that in setting that goal, it's just, it's impossible in your mind's eye for that not to happen. And that is that manifestation to help you
Ah,
achieve that purpose.
now I get it. So my success is inevitable. My things like that.
Yeah. Proceed as if success is inevitable. Right.
Got it. Okay. Uh,
I have my oop, hang on a second. All right. That was worth it, right? This is on my board.
I love it.
Okay. So I know it's like, where's he going? Why do you do that? Yeah, I've got a whiteboard right behind me with that among everything else.
I have one that says life doesn't come with an instruction manual. That's why fathers are here.
I like that. I wish my kids agree, but yeah, it's good in concept, Jeff.
Yeah, my kids point to it and laugh all the time, but okay. You said earlier, I wish we had 3 hours. I do too, because I've got a zillion more questions. I keep glancing at the clock. We're already running out of time, but you just mentioned perception. You talk about true perception. What's the difference between true perception and regular perception?
One's intentional and one's reactionary. So again, most of what we experience is just our perception, is our perception of reality. There's no such thing as getting it right 100%, because whatever is happening is coming through so many filters, whether that's the media, whether that's you were distracted because you were doing two things at once, whether you've got something else on your mind. And because we have so much information coming at us at all times, we've talked about all those things in this conversation alone. So we have our perception. True perception is a little bit closer to being recognizing what it is that I just said. So if you're looking at um, a conversation, let's say you're having a disagreement with somebody. Well, just because two different people think they're right about something doesn't make either wrong. And if you are, two rights don't make a wrong in this case. So if you are being conscientious about true perception, you can give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You can give the other person the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you miss something. Maybe there's a broader picture here. Maybe you're just not seeing it. So true perception has, again, a lot to do with, I think you're getting a sense of the theme here is that grounding yourself in the present, looking through everything in the lens of being here and now, being intentional and conscientious about your actions, your interactions, and so forth, and that you'll be getting closer to having a truer sense of perception than if you were just passive
Mm.
about it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to nominate you to give a speech about that to Congress, because they certainly seem to be, we're right, no, we're right. And
Yeah.
there's something in the middle that's probably closer to true.
If I thought I could change anything there, Jeff, I'd take you up on it, but I think that's beyond me.
How about you? You mentioned something earlier, and I was fascinated by that when I
Sure.
saw it on your website. What is earned confidence?
Yeah, earned confidence is really it's funny, we're kind of coming to it here in the conversation, but it's really very much, in my view, the foundation of it all. And in watching our time, I would like to hit on a couple concepts here that are very core to everything we're talking about, earned confidence being one of them. So earned confidence, I've had some life experience with this that was really one of the reasons why I wrote the book, which is the fact that we've all been through everything that we have in our lives. We've all achieved all the things positively that we have in our lives, but mainly it's about what we've overcome. And the fact is that we're still standing, we're still here. And so it really is a logic formula. It's very easy to convince yourself, I've been through everything I've been through. I've overcome it. I'm here. And so wait a second, I'm perfectly capable of overcoming whatever happens to me. And you're going to overcome it anyway because you have to. So if you just buy into that, that's your earned confidence. You've already done or overcome these various things. It empowers you to be able to, in this case, avoid uncertainties. So you don't. What are you worried about? Right? You don't have to worry. I mean, worry is a habit to a large degree. We're also hardwired to a certain extent. But as we're talking about the things that we can do to enrich our lives, to what are we training on to, like that, our own selves as that musical instrument that we're learning in this way. It's like when you catch yourself worrying, it's like, wait a second, is this really happening? What's the likelihood of this happening? Is this something I need to plan for? That's that fiction filter. There's a fiction filter tool in the course that gets into that. And things like assumptions, anything that's uncertain, you don't have to deal with it. You could just deal with the real because you can, because you have earned confidence. That's that grounding principle of staying in the present using earned confidence. The other side of that is around self-kindness. And the reason why self-kindness is so important, because especially just in the realm of personal development, is because all of us want to feel better about ourselves, or at least those of we're working on ourselves. That might be something we consider related to our self-image or our clarity or our self-esteem or our self-confidence or self-love. The challenge that we have is that it's all very vague. We might feel crappy about ourselves in whatever way that might be, or we just want to improve ourselves, but it is very challenging to get your head around, well, how do I get from here to there? Like, I know I feel this way, but how do I feel differently? And self-kindness, in much the same way as earned confidence, is definitive. It's a this or that. You're either being kind to yourself or you're not being kind to yourself. So when you come at this from that lens of self-kindness, and you just buy into the fact, I'll ask you, Jeff, is there any reason why you should be anything less than kind to yourself?
No, it
I
doesn't
would
make
hope,
sense
right?
to
That's a
me.
yeah,
Why would
that's
I
a
not want to be kind to me?
right. It's a
I
look,
love me.
if you can't answer that question affirmatively, that you already know where to start. So of course, right? So you're buying into that just the same as you are earned confidence. And now you've got this line in the sand that you've drawn. This is what helps you let go of your past baggage. It's not kind to yourself to hold on to resentments and regrets, or all those things that fit into that category. It's not kind to yourself to let those automatic negative thoughts that happened, that were hardwired in real time, to beat yourself up. I could speak to you from the experience of depression, what happens and not being kind to yourself, and what happens with your brain wiring in that way. Again, I'm watching our time here, but to wrap this up, is that when you take self-kindness as almost like your barometer, as for your self-improvement on a day-to-day basis, and say, am I being kind to myself or I'm not? If you keep pushing yourself back into the positive zone of, wait a second, like, I don't deserve this, treat myself like my best friend, like, I know that's getting a little bit into the woo-woo category, as people might think, but it's just a fact. It's definitive. You're either being kind or you're not. So if you look to self-kindness as your guiding light, if you will, and how you treat yourself, that in and to itself is going to help you shed, a lot of these negative things that happen day to day, or the things that you're really holding on to, you can let go of. And earn confidence helps you ward off the kinds of uncertainties. And then those are the two main principles within happiness that enable you to ground yourself in the present so that you can enjoy life the most and be at your best.
Well, you said it before, Matt. I could talk to you for hours and hours, but we are out of time. I'm sharing my screen right now. Can you tell people how they can reach you if they're interested in you, your courses, anything else?
Yeah, by all means. I mean, I've gone with the mattzinman.com website. So everything is there. A ton of free content. The Depression Defeater I mentioned is free, among some other resources I just want to get out there and help people with. So please, I hope you take advantage of those, and then getting a sense of it, whether it's something that you want to, certainly enjoy the book, but the courses are where I'm at, and to check those out. And even if you start with the mindset reset by itself, you can always just do that and then move up to either the well-being reset, or you can go into the life upgrade if you want to go all out. in that way. But it's my life's work, and you don't do it for it not to get not for people to benefit from it. So I hope people go and experience it for themselves.
Got it. And I love when people make specific requests. Adam Holzer asked for an introduction, so I'm going to hook the two of you up via LinkedIn. And I know you want to meet companies that to pilot a new 2.0 version of
Correct.
the Mindset Reset. How can we help you with that?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I have a demo site of the Wellbeing Reset, if I may say, at wbreset.com. And even for the general consumer, you can go there, and I have a brief video that walks people through just some of the examples of what these things are that we're talking about. And my challenge, Jeff, is like, even from a sales standpoint, like I could tell you about this all day long, like I could speak for days on. You'll still not get it because it's experiential. And so we want people to experience it. And I'm doing a pilot with companies that are really devoted to putting their people through something that's going to help them. Companies that have burnout is a really good example, and they really want a true, something that actually is the solution to remedy that. So I feel it's important to let companies do the mindset reset for free. And I do that in pods of 4 people because there's a social learning component to it that helps people with team building and keep each other accountable. And then if those 4 people do it, they're the best judges as to let the product speak for itself. And then, the company has the right testimonial from their own people to say, I really love this and I think other people should do it. So reach out. People can book my calendar at wbreset.com if they want to talk about that pilot. Thank you.
Is there a particular type of company you're looking for?
No, I'm looking for a company that, has the culture is what matters. I mean, you could say we're a people first company, or we're a best places to work company. That looks great on an award on your website, but you really have to have that culture, and you have to actually invest in your people to be able to follow through and walk that talk. So if you're that kind of company that that is willing to address it in this way, I'm happy to talk with you about it.
Got it. Perfect. So we don't use the Sales Pro Network on Facebook to self-promote or to sell to each other, but I know you're a member, and I appreciate your being there. If you'd like to go in and put that information in so that people can access it, please feel free.
Sure.
I'd like to, before we go, remind everybody that it's past Labor Day. And that means that there's no more excuse about everybody's on vacation. And you've got about 2, maybe 2.5 months before people start telling you, call me after the holidays. So I urge everybody, focus now. Matt's talked a lot about mindfulness and being present. Now, in particular, is a great time to focus your efforts, prospect your ass off, go talk to lots and lots of people and help them choose to do business with you. And I will end as I always do. Please remember that sales is a game of making things happen. Get out there and make sales happen. Matt, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance with us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.